Welcome back to the 6 key ingredients of becoming an effective Pythonista. This will be a bit shorter lesson. Yesterday was quite dense, but today the goal is to take the package we made yesterday and ship it to get it on PyPI so other people can easily pip install or poetry add it into their environment. So yeah, let's dive straight in. This is a very exciting topic. Yeah, also a confusing one because before I will show you the old way and the new way, and yeah, a lot of people get stuck there, but it's actually quite straightforward. Before doing so, one thing I forgot yesterday. So when we run the script, we do this whole thing: poetry run Python -m. That's a bit too much typing for my liking, so I can actually make a little alias in my TOML file. I'm copying this over from KarmaBot, which is another project. I will show in a bit, but we can link to the package, which is Pybites podcast. And I can link to the actual module, which is search. And I can call the function main, which we actually have, right? Which sets the whole thing in motion. And I'm going to call it just search, right? So now instead of typing all this, I can just say poetry run search. And that works fine. So that's a cool trick. Let me commit that. Edit an alias. Yeah. Command alias. Cool. With that out of the way, let's ship it. So the old way of doing things was to make a setup.py file. So here I'm in another open source project. By the way, you can find all our open source projects here under github.com, pybites-open-source. And one of those is PySource, which is a little project to a little command line tool to make it easier to read in Python source code. And the old way of getting packages published was to make a setup.py file, or also a Pybyte CFG would also work. And to install setup tools, use this setup function, and yeah, specify all those fields, right? But and this is actually the entry point thing we just made, which was also supported in that way. This is hard to remember. So with the new poetry way, if you opt to use poetry, which I hope you do, this is all, the whole publishing thing is based around that TOML file I've been editing, or that poetry uses to orchestrate everything. So just by setting these metadata in the TOML file, that will be used when you publish it on PyPI. And you don't have to do much more, honestly. So let's actually add a few fields here to make this a bit richer. I think I need these last 5 fields in my TOML file. This was kind of created when we did the poetry new. And I'm adding a license. I'm adding a link to the README, which will show up on PyPI. And I'm going to link to the repo. And let's do some keywords. Podcast. Search. Not sure. So that is that. And we can now do a poetry build, and that's going to create the wheel and the tar.gz files for publication. Now notice that gets stored under a folder called dist. So you want to ignore that folder. That's not something you want to commit to version control. So I'm going to add this to my git ignore file. And if I do a git status, effectively, dist is now ignored. Now, to put it on PyPI, what you ideally want to do first is to run a test. So there's another repository, test PyPI, and that's just purely to test out how it will look, if it works. So I'm going to do poetry publish -r test PyPI. But now it's actually publishing this to the test PyPI. So I can come here to test PyPI. And I should be able to find Pybites podcast half a minute ago. So there you go. Well, this was the very minimal README we have. We have the homepage repository linked. We have the author, so a link to my email, the keywords, the Python version, which it successfully processed from the TOML file. You can download it, and I can, of course, pip install it. But this is not the real deal yet. So this to me looks fine. So if I take off the -r test PyPI, now it will default to PyPI, and it will actually upload it to the real PyPI, which is awesome. It's just Poetry makes it very easy. So if I now search it on the real index, it's there. This is now available to the whole world. So if I going step back for a sec and go to my code directory, and let's just make a little test folder, test project. And let me just make a virtual environment the classic way without poetry. So Python -m, so just make sure Python 3.9 venv, and I call that venv. I'm just going to store it in the same directory. Now I'm going to enable that virtual environment. And now I'm in the virtual environment. So there are no dependencies yet. It's a completely new virtual environment. So it uses its own Python, it's Python 3.9, it's all good. Now I can pip install Pybites podcast. And this installs it now from PyPI. This installs my package from PyPI with its underlying dependencies. So that's really awesome. So now do a pip freeze. It installed Pybites podcast, version 0.1.0 and the related dependencies. So now I can use that in my project. So it's actually the actual code is actually stored here under side packages. So I should be able to import this class now. I can import that module. And I can import the class. So there you go. If I make an instance, and I make that callable, there you go. I'm using my code in another project, which I just pip installed. So again, mindset here, it just works out of the box. So look at how powerful it is if you can distribute your code and make it available in other projects. And that's one of the key skills as a developer. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you go try this out on your own, write code, use poetry, and use the publish command to get it up on PyPI. And if you do, hit me up and let me know which package I should pip install, because I would love to try it out. So this concludes the technical 3 days of the key ingredients. Tomorrow, you start on the mindset side with Julian, and you're going to straight into some productivity. And yeah, I hope you enjoy that too. All right, thanks for watching.